Imagine, if you will, that a friend of yours comes to you one day and says that he and his whole family are moving. Wow, okay. Put his 2-week notice in at work, pulled the kids out of school, house is on the market. In fact, they're putting up, many of their possessions on Craigslist and eBay and trying to get rid of as much as they possibly can. They're having a huge garage sale. Wow, okay, this is kind of sudden. Why are you moving? God told us to. God told you to move. Yeah, it was God. Okay, how do you know that it was God? Just know. Okay, what did your wife say when you told her? She just laughed. Are you having a lot of stress at work? Any issues? Maybe you can see a counselor. Maybe there's some medication out there. Maybe a short vacation is all you... No. Everything's been good. God told us to move. And so we're moving. Okay. So a couple weeks go by, they're able to sell the house, stuff, and loaded up what little possessions they had left into the van, and watch them go out the driveway, stop at the driveway, sit there, engine going, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, half an hour goes by, car sitting there at the edge of the driveway, finally turns left, and out they go. What would you call that? Would you call that faith? I think most of us, me included here, okay? Most of us might call that foolish. Most of us would call that reckless. To leave and not know where you're going? To leave and not know what you're going to do? To leave and not have a job lined up, not have a home lined up, not have places for the kids back in school. You're just going, and you're not sure where. You call it reckless, you call it foolish, maybe less generous, you might just call it stupid. But that's essentially what God called Abraham to do. Essentially, and in the book of Genesis, that's what he did. And so in our text this morning, Genesis chapter 12, this is what this is how the story of Abraham begins. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you." Notice there, not a destination, just like, I'll show you, just go, just get moving. I'll show you by the time you get there. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram went. Did you notice there's no conversation there afterwards? So God said this, and Abraham, well, let's have a discussion, let's have an argument, let's have some kind of meeting of the minds here. No. God says go. Abraham went, as the Lord had told him. And Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired at Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan. And they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the side of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." You might notice that. It wasn't to him I will give this land. It was to your offspring I will give this land. That becomes important later. So he built an altar there to the Lord, who had appeared to him. Over and over in Scripture, Abraham is called a great man of faith. And so in this series, Bold, and this sermon entitled Bold Faith, it makes a lot of sense for us to be talking about Abraham as this great man of faith. But on hearing this story, you're like, okay, is that faith as much as just foolishness? Is this the kind of thing that we should be emulating? Is this the kind of thing that I'm going to challenge you to do at the end of this sermon? Is that what God is calling each and every one of us to do? Just up and move at a moment's notice. Every year, this kind of always, I don't know why it shocks me, but every year it always shocks me. Every year at Ozark Christian College where I teach in Joplin, we have students that just kind of show up and aren't really sure why they're there. And they just sort of appear. And sometimes we have students that have never been to Joplin before, never been to the campus, never been in Missouri before, never been west of the Mississippi River before. I mean, they just know. When they saw our website, or they maybe, heard one of our professors speak at a CIY or a camp or something like that, and they just know in their hearts that that's where they're supposed to be. I don't know why that surprises me, but it does. And occasionally we get mixed up with another college, because in Branson, outside of Branson, there's a college called College of the Ozarks. You know this? Okay? And sometimes we get confused. So I remember there was one African student, this is years ago, before John came to us, but years ago we had an African student that was looking for College of the Ozarks. He wanted to go there. And he found our website instead. And so he decided, no, I'll just go there. He's going to make that decision like that, huh? Yeah. He came, he graduated, he's doing great. Another student we had, I don't know how this story ends, okay, so I probably shouldn't help, but I'm going to do it anyway. Another student came to us thinking that she was enrolling at College of the Ozarks. And was like, surprise! You're here instead. I don't know how that story ended up. I hope it has a good ending. I just don't know it. I don't know who the student is, so just told the story. So I mean, is that the kind of thing? Is that what we're talking about here? We're talking about bold faith. Well, maybe. These kind of strange stories. Abraham's story is a strange story. For God to ask this of him. What's stranger yet about this story in particular is that Abraham is like one of the least likely people when you really look at the story. For God to ask this of him and for him to obey like this for a few reasons. Take his name. Okay, just for his name, Abram, here at the beginning, God changes it later. His name means exalted father. Okay? He's 75 years old. His name is exalted father. Now, in the ancient world, names were a real strong key to your identity. Okay? So you kind of see the irony. He's 75 years old, doesn't have any kids, and his name is exalted father. So everybody sort of calls him Abraham. It's like, named rich when you don't have any money. Or named Harry when you're bald. Abraham. Did Abraham grow to hate his name? Just the irony of this? And God shows up and he changes his name. Oh, good, finally. God's going to deal with this issue. No, God makes it worse. No longer are you exalted father, Abram. Now you are father of multitudes, Abraham. Thanks. It's like, I don't get any kids. And his name is, Father, this is the guy that God is going to use, huh? This is the guy. The guy can't even live up to his name. Some of you may believe, some of us may believe that we've not quite lived up to our name. There may be a level of expectation that is on us for whatever reason. Maybe it's because of the family you grew up in. Maybe it's because of the opportunities you've had. Maybe you kind of feel like you haven't quite lived up to those things. But bold faith, the kind of bold faith that we're going to talk about here today, it does not come Let me be clear on this. Bold faith does not come from meeting other people's expectations of you. That's not where faith is found. And so many of our students understand that. When I talk to my students about, when they first came to believe and grew up, many of them grew up in the church. Some of them, quite a lot of them, didn't grow up in the church. They grew up outside. They came to faith later. But the students that grew up in the church, when they talk about their first coming to faith and baptism, a lot of them will admit, I really did that to kind of please mom and dad, please grandpa and grandpa. And yes, they believed, but it was kind of the expectation. And it wasn't until later that they realized the decision that they really truly had to make for themselves. And so many of them would have kind of a secondary faith experience at a camp or a CIY in their teenage years. Pleasing our parents, satisfying other people's expectations of us. That's not where faith comes from. Abram knows that. He hadn't lived up to his name yet. And God was using him. But that's not the only reason Abraham's story is kind of unlikely. The other thing is, if you look at the rest of its story, if you just kind of started in Genesis chapter 12, in the beginning of Abraham's story, you just kept reading for several chapters and kind of see the majority of Abraham's story there in the Bible, you kind of see a guy who's not always real consistent in his faith. This is not the kind of guy who just kind of starts right here and just kind of ends right here and it's a straight shot up and I've been consistent and faithful and growing every day. No, this is kind of a roller coaster. Abraham's life's got some real high highs. That time God called him to take Isaac up on top of the mountain and sacrifice him. And Abraham was willing to do it until God stopped him. But Abraham's also got some real low lows. God had promised that you and your wife, Sarah, are going to have a child, and he was getting up there in age, and Sarah was getting up there in age, and this is not happening, God. We'll make this happen for us. So Sarah suggests, and Abraham agrees, take my slave, Hagar. And he does. Kind of sort of by force. It's not a good story. And then when Hagar gets pregnant and Sarah is upset, she has second thoughts about this whole thing, and she asks for permission from Abraham to beat her slave, her pregnant slave, and Abraham said, yeah, go ahead, she's yours, do whatever you want to. This is our bold man of faith. There's that time when they're always on the move, and they come to this kind of area where there's a tribal king in the area, and Abraham is afraid, because he's got all these possessions and such a wealthy man, that this king will have him kill, marry Sarah, and then just sort of consume or just sort of absorb all his possessions and slaves and livestock and everything. And so Abraham is so afraid of that he lies and says that Sarah is not his wife but his sister. And so, king, feel free to marry her, and we'll give you a nice big dowry. He's kind of thinking about his survival. And he does that. He doesn't just do that once. He does that twice. You're like, Abraham, wherever bold faith comes from, it doesn't come from having a spotless track record. It doesn't come from meeting other people's expectations, and it doesn't come from having a spotless track record. And while absolutely we should all strive towards holiness, absolutely, we too often beat ourselves up so much when we fail that we're unable to learn what it is that God is trying to teach us through this, through our time of failure, to our time of redemption. Faith comes as a response to God's grace, not our own ability to hold everything together. That's not where faith comes from. You are not able, okay, this is the truth today. You are not able to hold everything together.